Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Amarachi.
And this is our app Stellar. We made Stellar in our apprenticeship at Accenture, and this is our landing page made to match the designs that our designers made for us. So the Google button up here is a good example of a time that the devs and the design work together, because the Google button requires Google styling, and then our devs wanted it to fit better with the app. So that's the button we came up with. And then if the person wants to learn a little bit more about the app, they can scroll down, and at the very bottom of the page, they can click on Google. So what happens when you click on Google is it asks Google for the person to sign in, so that way we're not taking care of the passwords. You can choose where you want to sign in or use another account. And then once you click the button, it sends information from Google back to our front end. Our front end takes the information and sends it encrypted to our back end, because that's what Google requests. Our back end then sends it to Google. Google verifies that everything's okay. It sends the information back to the back end, and then the back end sends the information to the front end, whether the user exists or not, and that will determine if the user is logged in, and then we have persistent login, or if they come to the registration page here.
Thank you, James. So yeah, our registration page has 3 screens, and they all collectively make up our onboarding process. So if a user is not already created in our backends, they're brought to the first registration page after signing in with Google. This page pretty much asks the user to confirm that their first and last names are correct, as well as their email address. Once that information is correct, I click on next, and they're brought to the second onboarding screen, which asks for their birth information. So we built our backend using Node and GraphQL, and one of our tables, our user table, has a lot of different fields because we're using data from Astrology API, and in order to get very customized and personalized astrology data for each user, we need to collect very specific information regarding that user's birth to send back to the API in order to get those results instead of generalized information. So this page actually is making a few API calls. With birth location, not only did we need to gather a city, but we also needed more specifically to gather birth latitude and longitude. And so we had a lot of conversation with our designers about what information would be appropriate to display on this page, how not to overwhelm the user, and what things we could just handle in the back end. So here, if our user starts typing in a city, such as Spanaway, our API then provides us a list of city options, and the user chooses the one that's appropriate for them. At this stage, the birth longitude and latitude is being calculated in our backend, is being saved as well. And then also we need to collect birth time zone. So by the time we get to the end of the page, we're making the API call as well to get the time zone information. So the user goes through each of these fields, fills out their birth date, their time of birth as well. And once that information is all complete, they click next, and they are brought to the reveal screen. So as you saw before, calculating the stars is one of our loading screens, and we used ApolloClient in our front end to process our queries and mutations. And so that was a challenge for both me and James because we hadn't before or previously used ApolloClient, ApolloServer, or GraphQL. But what was a cool thing about ApolloClient is that it does provide us with a loading state. So when something is processing or is in transition, we can display specific components in the meantime. So once the user is successfully created and is registered to Stellar, they're brought to the big reveal page. And with the reveal page, it's the first exposure that the user gets to how personalized and customized Stellar is. The UI here is in the red tones because Elizabeth is an Aries, and an Aries is a fire sign. So our designers were really awesome in creating 4 different UI color themes for each of the 4 sun sign elements. User can either be a fire sign, a water sign, air sign, or earth sign. And each of those signs are represented by different color schemes. So Elizabeth, she's an Aries, and her sun sign element is fire. So the first half of the page describes like what her zodiac sign means, or what it means to be that zodiac sign, and starts to talk about your sun, moon, and rising signs. As you scroll down to the bottom, we come across a simplified birth chart. And though it's not interactive, this information, the icons are being displayed in each of these zodiac containers are dynamic. So just like your birth chart is unique. It's a snapshot of the sky at the exact time and location you came into the world. So when Elizabeth was born, the sun was in Aries, her rising sign was in Taurus, and Libra was in, or her moon sign was in Libra. So then once we get to the home page, you notice that the navigation bar does appear, and it indicates what page you're on currently, or what the current view the user is on by underlining the tab.
At the top of the home page, we have Good Afternoon, Lizard, and afternoon is dynamic, going morning, afternoon, or evening. And then we have Your Day at a Glance. We have the shortened version of the horoscope to a maximum of 220 characters, or the nearest word to that, followed by an ellipsis. You can view the full horoscope, which will take you to the calendar page. And then below it, we have what our sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign are, and what each of those mean. So your sun is involved with your identity, your moon, your emotions, and rising sign, outward persona.
As we continue to scroll down the home page, we come across the full birth chart, and here we see that there's a lot more icons present than there was on the reveal page. There are 11 icons, including the sun, moon, and rising signs, as well as the rest of the planets, excluding Earth. And again, this data is unique per user, so it shows where these planets were located, like what sign these planets were located when the user was born. So for Elizabeth, as we can see, Pluto was in Scorpio, Moon was in Libra, and Neptune was in Capricorn. When a user isn't hovering over any of the icons, the user is fitted with this hover to discover prompt. So as I showed you before, a user can hover over these icons, and our Astrology API provided us with this data on how these planets in these signs at time of birth affects, or what it has to say about the user at the time. So we can go to the calendar page either by clicking View Full Horoscope or from the navigation, and we can continue reading on today's horoscope. We can also click on yesterday's tab and view yesterday's horoscope, and we can also go to tomorrow's tab and again get a 220 character limit on tomorrow's horoscope. And the yesterday and today horoscopes are also limited to 500 characters.
At the bottom of the calendar page, we have the calendar, and it starts out with just the moon phases because we don't want to overwhelm the user, and it'll tell you where the moon is on each day. So today is the 22nd, and on the 23rd, we have the icon for the waning crescent, and it tells you how the waning crescent affects you. And then if you want more information, we can click on signs. We can also get rid of moons. And right now we have a moon in Libra. So we have increased sociability. Both of the information for these comes from different places. So far, all of the information has come from Astrology API, but this information wasn't available. So the moons comes from iCalendar, which was a Catalan API, and the signs are scraped from the web because we couldn't find an API that gave us this information about each of the signs, when the moon was in those signs and for how long. Moving on to the planets page, we have our list to the left that will follow us down the page a little bit. And if we hover over the planets, you can see Jupiter in the list on the left is selected, and also on the right, so we can learn more about how Jupiter affects us. And that happens for every single planet. And then also, if we want to hover on the left-hand side, we can still see information about those planets. The search bar was finished, but it was not merged because we had a code freeze.
So for our compatibility page, that was something that will be implemented in version 2 of the Stellar app. So it's coming soon. We thank you for listening, and that's Stellar.
Thanks.